Good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So in this video, we are going to be talking about the tariff inflations, or the inflationary tariffs that are done by design, and how it is that this is benefiting monetary policy. Now, if you've been following the channel for any length of time, you are very well aware of the credible threat theory and how it is that they use their words to guide the markets, guide monetary policy. And by having an elevated inflation expectation, they are raising the neutral interest rate, which is what the Federal Reserve is looking to do so that they can have their monetary policy become an effective tool through the interest rate adjustments. And I know that's very complicated for a lot of people to hear and try to internalize, especially if you're trying to understand what it is that is taking place right now. So most people, when they look at what's taking place, they think it's a very snap judgment kind of issue coming from the Federal Reserve and their monetary policy based on the current administration's all of a sudden impact coming from the trade war idea of tariffs that are going to be hitting the economy. And now everybody's very uncertain about the situation. They don't know what's coming. They have belief that there's going to be panic in the streets kind of thing, that there's going to be a horrible time in the future. You're seeing the stock market crashing on account of this kind of fear and uncertainty out there. And ultimately, it comes down to nobody really knowing what's happening. Like, even the idea of the tariffs that have been declared, I don't know how to quite put it, but the idea of what tariffs are now coming to the global economy has the idea of negotiations written into it, which now leads me to believe that we still don't know what it is that has taken place. And this is exactly how it is that they conduct themselves, is to keep that fear and uncertainty, that open-endedness guided into the market so that they could use their propagandized tool of the mainstream media to then guide the markets. It's like no easier explanation than that. So ultimately, the Federal Reserve needs a higher inflation expectation. It's not a 2% anchor like a lot of people want to think it is. It's an elevated 2% inflation that they are looking for, moderately above 2% for some time. Now, nobody knows exactly what moderately above 2% means. Like, is that 2.1, 2.7, 3.2? Who knows what it is? Nobody knows what moderately above 2% is because they don't define it. And nobody knows for what some time means because they don't define that either. And so when you follow the credible threat theory, you can then realize that they are not using a 2% target in mind. They have a 2% average inflation rate over time, a flexible average inflation rate. This is one where they make up for past deviations from that 2% target that they have never been able to achieve. So as we have this elevated inflation expectation that they are finally able to incorporate into their monetary policy, what it does is it raises that neutral interest rate. Now, the neutral interest rate is the rate that's neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. It's neutral, right? This is when the Fed funds rate is perfect, and there is no way of telling where the neutral interest rate, but there is a way of adjusting the neutral interest rate up or down based on the inflation expectation that comes into the future. So if you have an elevated inflation expectation, you are going to demand a higher return on your capital investments, and you are going to expect to pay a higher price going into the future. And with this, we'll raise the neutral interest rate, and if the Federal Reserve stands still, neutral will find them. This is the goal. This is the outcome. Now, I'm not trying to say this is what the administration is doing for the Federal Reserve. What I'm saying is this is what the Federal Reserve was wanting for their monetary policy. They want to be at neutral, and they want to be well above the lower bound of zero. When they hit zero with their Fed funds rate, they're out of monetary policy. They're out of tools. They can't kickstart the economy. And if they have a low neutral interest rate that they're dealing with, and again, this is the interest rate which is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy, If they have a low neutral interest rate, well, then trying to get the Fed funds rate far enough below neutral before hitting the lower bound of zero is not possible. They're at a low neutral. They hit that lower bound. Monetary policy can't stimulate the economy with interest rate adjustments. But if the neutral interest rate is well elevated, now dropping the Fed funds rate back to zero gives a big stimulating effect, because now they can drop the Fed funds far enough below neutral to actually stimulate the economy. The only way to get the neutral interest rate to be elevated is if you have an elevated inflation expectation. If the Federal Reserve stands still with their Fed funds rate and the neutral interest rate is rising off of zero because of an elevated inflation expectation, which pulls that neutral interest rate ever higher, if you have this elevated inflation expectation and it pulls the neutral interest rate higher and the Federal Reserve is standing still, neutral interest rate gets ever closer to the Fed funds rate and makes the economy less restricted. See, as we go into the future and we have this elevated inflation expectation, the Fed says, no, we're going to stand still because we don't know what's going on with the uncertainty with all the tariffs and all the other stuff that's coming, especially with the idea of negotiations going into tariffs. We really don't know what's going on with them. So we're just going to stand still. And we're going to have to see what happens. And everybody says, well, we know what's happening. There's going to be higher inflation. The whole world's coming to an end. You can see the Dow Jones is crashing like crazy, with a 2,200 point drop or something like that yesterday. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was huge, right? And everybody's losing their mind over what's going on. And they think that the world's given up on the dollar and the United States. And, we're going to return all this manufacture and all this hopes and dreams and beliefs and all kinds of chaos that's going on. But nobody is really talking about the fact that we still don't know exactly what it is that is taking place. Right? I mean, like I left a link down in the description. Bill Ackman, that famous investor, billionaire dude, whatever, right? He's always up there in the news. And I just love that. He says, if I had 3 words, call the president, right? He's talking out to these other nations, call the president, and work out a deal with them, right? Keep in these negotiations, keep that uncertainty going, keep the fear and anxiety ripping. And if you can keep that elevated inflation expectation, you'll begin to raise the neutral interest rate, give it some time, and it'll become less restrictive upon the economy by raising that neutral interest rate. Remember, it's the rate that's neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. So when we think about the credible threat theory and the pieces that go into it, this is exactly how they work it. They use the words, they use the propaganda, they use that fear and anxiety to push people into a particular belief. And it doesn't really matter. See, this is the thing about it. It doesn't really matter if they cut or not. The cutting of the interest rate is so unimportant to this that when people focus in on it, they literally miss how it is that they are conducting the monetary policy is being conducted. And this is what's really crazy about it, is because people are just so hyper focused on the interest rate adjustment itself that they forget that there is a lag period between 6 months to a year, even longer, from the time that they cut rates or are doing an interest rate adjustment to the time that it actually impacts the economy. I mean, you think about it, there's really, nobody really pays attention to that at all. Nobody's going back going, okay, well, 6 months ago, what did the Federal Reserve do? No, they're talking about what's happening right now. What is the Fed going to do in the next few minutes? Right? So when we think about how it is that the Federal Reserve is really conducting themselves, they're using their words. And the propaganda coming from the mainstream media is pushing an elevated inflation expectation, which is exactly what the Federal Reserve would want if they had a position in which that they want the neutral interest rate to rise. So if you think about it, these two are totally working together. I mean, this is working out so well for the Federal Reserve, they don't have to do anything. They are literally like, well, boys, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see again. Sorry, sit down. Don't do anything, right? I mean, they're just sitting in a wait and see pattern for ever. They're not doing anything at all. This is what I laugh about it is, Donald Trump keeps screaming about lower the interest rates. The Fed should, I demand them to lower the interest rates immediately. And I'm thinking, you already got an inflation expectation. Why would you want to raise an inflation expectation even more? Right? It's not about raising the inflation expectation even more. He already did that with the tariffs and the credible threat of, not even the credible threat of tariffs, the reality threat of tariffs and the reality of negotiations to go along with the tariffs. So we don't know what exactly it is. So the uncertainty is there. But it's also the uncertainty of the Federal Reserve saying, nope, we're standing still, and Donald Trump going, I'm going to fire Jerome Powell if he doesn't lower rates, right? You see, it's nothing but uncertainty that is created within this. But if you know the certainty behind the idea that the Federal Reserve is wanting an elevated neutral interest rate and an elevated Fed funds rate, if you know that as a certainty, because this is what you have been focusing in on the monetary policy that they have communicated literally for years, almost even decades now, like this exact thing, like what do we do when we hit the lower bound of zero? What do we do with the Fed funds rate? How is it that we are going to communicate to the markets, to the population, to the people out there, what it is that they plan on doing for the future so that they can operate monetary policy with no interest rate adjustments because they were at the lower bound of zero? I know this is complicated, but I think, again, they are using their words. And you can see it plain as day right now. Think about it, like the idea of negotiations. Call the president. 3 words Bill Ackman has. 3, call the president so that, we can keep these people uncertain about what it is that's happening. I got so much information on the credible threat theory, guys. It is just unreal to even know where to begin. Like, I can prove so much through the Fed's own statements that it's like, it's incredible. Like, think about this. Jerome Powell back in August of 2020, right? He says this: the persistent undershoot of inflation from our 2% long-run objective is a cause for concern. Many find it counterintuitive that the Fed would want to push up inflation. Again, this was back in 2020, August of 2020. This is before COVID really caused inflation. Before August 2020, right? Again, this is, I'll give you the exact date. I think it's August 27th. August 27th of 2020, new economic challenges in the Fed's monetary policy review. Right? And it says right in there, the persistent undershoot of inflation from our 2% long-run objective is a cause for concern. Many find it counterintuitive that the Fed would want to push up inflation. They wanted it, right? Says, after all, low and stable inflation is essential for a well-functioning economy, and we are certainly mindful that higher prices for essential items such as food, gasoline, and shelter add to the burdens faced by many families, especially those struggling with jobs or with lost jobs and incomes. They know that inflation is going to be painful for the people at the lower end. They knew it. They know it's painful. People who have a bunch of money, it ain't painful for them. It's a frustrating thing. Oh, I'm frustrated. Oh man, I got to cut back. I got to eat generic brand cereal instead of name brand. Oh, boo-hoo, right? People at the lower end actually have to cut back on their necessities, which is an incredibly painful thing. The Fed knows this. They knew it. They even described it. We know it's painful for them. However, you're going to have to feel the pain, right? The Fed wants you in pain and suffering. Why? However, inflation that is persistently too low can pose a serious risk to the economy. They didn't want persistently low inflation. They want persistently high inflation. I mean, he's saying it right here back in 2020, 5 years ago, before COVID. They were saying, hey, you know what? We got an issue with the Fed funds rate being at this lower bound of zero, y'all. We're going to need some inflation expectation that can be elevated, and it's going to be real painful upon people. Sorry about that. Real sorry about that, but poses risk for economy, However, inflation that is persistently too low can pose serious risks to the economy. Inflation that runs below its desired level can lead to an unwelcome fall in long-term inflation expectations, which in turn can pull actual inflation even lower, resulting in an adverse cycle of ever lower inflation expectations. The Fed was looking for elevated inflation expectations. They are getting it. Jerome Powell was totally in cahoots with Donald Trump and pushing this whole idea right now. They are in the background. They were they went golfing. It wasn't just Donald Trump out there. Old homeboy probably had a hat and like wore a mask, and he was just like, "Hey, pal, come on out, man. Let's go hit some golf balls, man." Right? Let's go talk about how badass we are at creating an inflation expectation to totally save your monetary policy. Let's go give high fives, man. Nobody else sees it this way. I understand that. I know that people are looking at this so frustrated, saying, oh man, there's so much more to it. This is old. This is going back decades, guys. This is how they are conducting monetary policy. They are using propagandized information. All right. Push the idea of an elevated inflation expectation. They wanted it. Yeah. Here. Where is it? Here we go. This is one that I really like, right? This is a recent speech too. Where was this? This was February 21st of 2025. So just, a couple months ago, right? This is reading between the lines, textual analysis of central banks' communications, right? How they communicate. This is given by Phillips Jefferson. You want to read some cool stuff? Read speeches given by Phillips Jefferson on communications, the Federal Reserve communications. Oh man, talk about a guy who is focused in on the propagandized information that they are delivering. He talks about it. He explains it. Listen, here, listen to this, right? He says it right here. Using textual analysis, high-frequency asset price data, the high-frequency central bank communication data. Okay, using this data. The research shows that investors' reactions to specific sentences communicated by the central bank are quickly incorporated into asset prices. They are communicating specific sentences that they are incorporating into asset prices quickly. They know how to do this. They know how to deliver the message. Saying, okay, guys, you ready for this? You ready? Okay, you lined up? You guys, media? Okay, outlets, different guys, you all ready for this? Okay, let's do it. Bang. Right? Quickly absorbed into the markets, prices adjusted. Talking about it months ago. This is how they do it. All right? Policymakers know that their communications are likely to affect the course of short-term interest rates, other asset prices, and the associated economic outlook, resulting in an easing or tightening of financial conditions. Their communications do it. Right? It didn't say anything about interest rate adjustments. Their communications. The communications adjust the short-term interest rates. All right. And that's what's crazy about this whole thing. Let me move on here, guys. I know I'm kind of excited. I drank a whole pot of coffee this morning, so you guys are going to have to deal with it. Sorry. All right. See, this is a good one. This one's a little bit harder to absorb. But again, this is coming from Philip Jefferson again. This was May 13th of 2024. So this is like, what, last year? Excuse me. Says, surely sometimes central bank communications can have unintended consequences. Let me give you two examples. First, there is always the risk that policymakers' statements about the economic outlook or their expected future path of the policy rate are interpreted by the public with a false sense of certainty. Now, this is very difficult to kind of wrap your head around, but I want to give you an example of it because it worked out just exactly the way that they are describing here from 2023. How many people at the end of 2023 were absolutely convinced that the Federal Reserve was going to be lowering interest rates dramatically? They were going to be lowering them to 0, 7 interest rate cuts. The dot plot, remember that? The dot plot was going to be screaming all these interest rates cuts coming into the future. Emergency interest rate cuts, all because the economy was going to hell in 2024. It didn't happen, right? It was the future. Okay, I'm sorry. Statements about the economic outlook of their expected future path of the policy rate are interpreted by the public with a false sense of certainty. They had a false sense of certainty that was taking place at the time. They knew for sure because of it. I was asked a million times, what about the dot plot talking about, 7 interest rate cuts or going to 0, all this other stuff. Okay. For example, a data-dependent forward guidance announcement, right, much like this dot plot, can be mistaken for a commitment to a fixed path of interest rates. This is exactly what I was just describing. When that interpretation is proven wrong down the road, which it did, right? Later on, we didn't get all those interest rate cuts like the dot plot had interpreted, right? Had convinced, had people committed to, right? When that interpretation is proven wrong down the road, it can create more volatility and uncertainty than if there had been no announcement. If they didn't say anything at all, at least people would have been calm about it. They would have been a little bit more certain, but it created all this uncertainty by blasting that out there. People were convinced. They communicated it in a way that convinced you. They know how to do it. Okay? So they delivered information that convinced you that there was going to be all these interest rate cuts coming into the future, and then it was proven wrong. Uncertainty was elevated, right? Volatility, uncertainty, then if there had been no announcement. So if they didn't say anything at all, you wouldn't have been all uncertain about it. But they said a bunch of stuff about it. It created this situation in which that it proved wrong, and then now you got all this uncertainty. That is why policymakers always make sure to stress data dependency of the future policy decisions. Don't you notice that? We're data dependent. Always data dependent. When people asked me about it back in 2023, what do you think about the dot plot and all the interest rate cuts that were coming? I said, that dot plot is predicting interest rates cuts based on the current events that are taking place today, and that if this is to continue. But nothing stays the same. By the time we get there, there's always going to be something different happening. I see the super chat. I'll get back to that here in just a minute. Thank you. They always change. There's never the same circumstances. Right? That is why policymakers always make sure to stress that they are data dependent for future policy decisions. Second, it is possible that the public misinterprets the views of the individual policymakers as a committee view. Now, this is getting important here. I know this is complicated, guys, but if you really want to internalize this stuff and see the credible threat theory for what it really is, you have to pay attention, and you have to focus in on these things and really detail, get into the details of the words, right? All right. It is possible that the public misinterprets the views of the individual policymakers as a committee view. Now, you think about it, all these different policymakers come out throughout the news and they babble on about this, that, and the other thing and talk about their view about what it is that needs to come to interest rate cuts. These are all the different members of the Federal Reserve, the FOMC, coming out, blasting their thoughts. And then people interpret that information as a committee view. They listen to that and they say, the Federal Reserve is committed to this particular view that this one FOMC member is saying. That is how they screw this. That's how they misinterpret. That's how the uncertainty is risen. Right? Okay, goes on. Right? The potential for misinterpretation is especially acute when many policymakers speak at the same time and disagree with each other. Right? I mean, how many times do we see that coming out? All the time, constantly. The diversity of viewpoints among policymakers lends itself to a stimulating debate. We all argue about it. Right? All over the news, constantly. People chirping in their ear their expectations and beliefs of what it is that's coming into the future. And ultimately, and so it lends itself to a stimulating debates and ultimately better policy. Better policy. Why? Because they get to use their words to guide the markets. But in such a situation, more communication could increase rather than reduce uncertainty about our policy. They are trying to do it. They create the uncertainty on purpose. By creating the uncertainty, they can then communicate what it is that they are trying to do into the future, which then has the markets guided. Think about it. Here we go. Let me see if I can find the next one. This stuff is so good, guys. Once you dive into it and you really see it for what it is, knowing that they had a plan set in motion from over 2 decades ago, right? Knowing that they were going to hit that lower bound of zero with the Fed funds rate. And now I understand that a lot of people who are looking at the economy now are saying, dude, we are so far away from the Fed funds rate. I don't even know why you incorporate that. It's the fact that they changed the way that they communicate about monetary policy in order to deal with the fact that they were at that lower bound of zero. Once they changed and started communicating about monetary policy at the lower bound of zero, that became their effective tool, right? And this is where it's important to start to internalize this. me see here. Oops. Um, this being able to communicate about monetary policy. See, this is where, like, I think understanding that they had to do it this way is probably important to then being able to understand like what it is that they are doing right now. To know that the communication style was developed over the last decade in order to deliver information the way that they are doing it right now. This is like the heart of it, right? To understand like they are doing it in this fashion. Here's the thing. They've already done tests in that proven that monetary policy delivered to like essentially somebody who is not privy, like they don't care about monetary policy, they don't care about economics. If they are to deliver information to them and say, hey, this is some inflationary information, data that you're about ready to receive, they will get that information and it will be essentially forgotten in 30 days, right? They will not remember. At 6 months, it is completely vanished. Like they can't even get a recalling of it. Like they can't even be reminded of this information. That's how bad it is, right? And that's if they're told one time. So they reiterate it over and over and over and over and over and over again through many different channels in order to deliver this information in such a consistent way that it will be internalized. And they know that they have to do this. Now, if we go back to this speech given by Jefferson, it actually, I'm not going to read the whole speech, but I got some highlighted parts within this speech that really are telling of this, telling of how it is that they propagandize the information in order to conduct themselves. Listen to this. This is back in 1981. Karl Brunner, the Swiss monetary economist, called central banking an esoteric art and lamented that central banks, I'm sorry, yeah, okay. In Jesus, I'm just stuttering. I have had way too much coffee. Okay. Called central banking an esoteric art and lamented central banks' inherent impossibility to articulate insights in explicit and intelligible words and sentences. Brunner, at the time, said central banks' wisdom dictated that monetary policy should say as little as possible. See, now this is how monetary policy was conducted back during, like, say, even Greenspan's day, is that they would communicate as little as possible. Some research of that vintage tried to rationalize this secrecy through notion that the monetary policy would be particularly effective if it was to surprise the markets. Now, this is how they used to work. They would surprise them. You would just wake up one day and you're like, holy crap, the Federal Reserve adjusted interest rates. What's going on, right? And then they would try to figure it out and the markets would have to adjust to that, right? This goes on. It says, expectations became a focal point in academic and policy circles with the emergence of the new Keynesian models in 1990s as a framework for monetary policy. In these models, aligning the expectation of decision makers in the private sector with those of policymakers. So decision makers in the private sector, that's like the business owners, you and me, deciding on whether or not we are going to buy a house or car or whatever. Decision makers, right? Expectations of decision makers in the private sector with those of policymakers produce superior economic outcomes. See, if they communicated about what they were about ready to do, they could get more power out of it. Like if they communicated about the interest rate adjustments before they did it, they could get more power out of them. They knew this, right? Mike Woodford, one of the developers of the new Keynesian model, put it this way: not only do expectations about policy matter, but very little else matters, right? Not only do expectations about policy matter, but very little else matters. This is why it's so important to listen to the communications of what it is that they are saying, right? What it is that they are trying to deliver to the people out there, the public. You have to stand back. You don't receive the information like you are getting the data from them. Receive the information as what is it that they're trying to communicate to the people, right? Because it's a different view. I know this is difficult to understand, but this is how they are doing it. This is a game of psychology, a game of gaslighting, right? Think about this. How many people believe that the Federal Reserve is going for a 2% target on their inflationary scenario? This is absolutely incorrect. They're going for a 2% average inflation rate over time, right? And I'll prove that if I need to again, but I've proved it so many times. I mean, through their own words. Again, it's stated over and over again. Just look at the consensus statement, right? Or yeah, isn't that what it is? The consensus statement, the statement of long-run strategies. All right. During the tenure of Chairman Bernanke, there was another burst of innovation in the way that policy was communicated. In 2007, the first SEP was published. That's the Statement on Economic Projections. This is famously known as the dot plot. Okay, was published to convey systematically the economic outlook of the FOMC's participants. Right. So this was developed in 2007. They were like, hey, man, this is a good way to actually put out some forward guidance. Right, much like people were believing at the end of 2023, right? Okay. In 2011, Chairman Bernanke started holding press conferences after every other FOMC meeting. In 2012, the Fed adopted an explicit inflation targeting of 2% and started publishing individuals' FOMC participants' views of the appropriate path of the future funds rate, now known as the dot plot. During these years, Loretta, in her capacity as research director at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, contributed to the ongoing works on communication in collaboration with the policymakers and the Federal Reserve Board staff. This is how they were doing it. They like sat back and they're like, how do we do this? How do we figure out a way that we could communicate all this stuff to the people so that they can have the forward guidance that we need to deliver the power of the interest rate adjustments? They realized that they could get a lot of power out of those interest rate adjustments by delivering the message ahead of time. Of course, this was an extraordinary time for monetary policy, as interest rates in most advanced economies were close to zero. This is why they were doing it, because they were at the zero lower bound. They had no other choice, right? They had to come up with a way of dealing with monetary policy that was outside the interest rate adjustments. The interest rate adjustments wasn't working for them anymore. They were at the lower bound of zero. Advanced economies were close to zero following the global financial crisis. The FOMC employed forward guidance, explicit communication about the future path of the policy rate, as a key tool to deal with the unprecedented situation. Forward guidance was the key tool. The research community had found that such forward guidance could be a very effective tool in the context of the new Keynesian paradigm. When Loretta became president of the Federal Reserve Bank, Cleveland, in 2014, she supported the continued use of forward guidance. The continued use of this. Let's keep talking to the people. Let's use that for our monetary policy. Let's sit on our hands and grab the mic and not do anything at all except for jawboning a bunch of words. All right. Continue the use of forward guidance during these extraordinary times, and particularly to communicate a lower for longer policy that could provide accommodations in the presence of the effective lower bound constraint. She also insisted that forward guidance could be used effectively in normal times, such as whatever normal is. In normal times, when you're not constrained by the lower bound, when you're up here elevated like we are, in normal times. She insisted that forward guidance could be used effectively even in normal times as a means of clarifying the FOMC's reaction function. Loretta, as a member of the FOMC committee on communications, developed and advocated for several proposals to improve communications. One proposal was to publish a measure of uncertainty surrounding the Statement on Economic Projections forecast numbers. She was concerned that uncertainty could be underestimated by the public if it wasn't communicated. She was concerned about them not having enough uncertainty. Did you guys catch that? I know sometimes as I get on, you go like, oh, boring. What did he say? Right? Listen to what she just said. One proposal was to publish measures of uncertainty surrounding the SEP forecast numbers. She was concerned that uncertainty could be underestimated by the public if it wasn't communicated. We got to communicate the uncertainty. Why? What did we learn earlier from what did Jefferson say about the right? The potential for misinterpretation is especially acute when many policymakers at the same time disagree with each other. The diversity of viewpoints among policymakers lends itself to stimulating debate and ultimately better policy. Misinterpretations and uncertainty. It leads to better policy. And she was concerned back in the day, right? She wanted to develop ways of clarifying the uncertainty surrounding the S&P. One proposal was to publish a measure of uncertainty surrounding the SEP forecast number. She was concerned that uncertainty would be underestimated by the public if it wasn't communicated. A couple of videos ago, I talked about 6 different Federal Reserve articles talking about the Federal Reserve and the different Federal Reserve officials, and uncertainty was in the headline. All 6 of them. In fact, one of the articles was something like the Fed's new favorite word is uncertainty, right? Like, how clear does it need to be? These people were looking to do exactly what it is we got going on with this propaganda. And if you see the propaganda clearly, it's obvious. It's so obvious that they are getting what it is that they want out of this. I don't know why it is that seems to be the only one who is delivering this information, but this is serious, guys. Like, what we are going through right now is nothing to be taking into a fearful belief, or one that is like some hidden game. It's not. It's clearly communicated right through the monetary policy. And to me, people are like, man, you just don't get. And I'm like, bro, like, they said that they were going to do this. They said that they wanted this. They wanted it to be this way. They wanted fear and uncertainty. They wanted elevated inflation expectation. They needed it. They needed it to save their monetary policy. And as I sit here and I read it through their own words, and I see it taking place out there, I didn't know that they were going to do it the way they did it. I mean, I didn't know back when I was reading this speech given by Jerome Powell, August the 27th of 2020, where they were talking about, it seemed counterintuitive the Fed would want to push up inflation. And I'd be like, how are you going to do that, man? I mean, you tried to do inflation with quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 and failed to produce inflationary scenario, even though you expanded the balance sheet from $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion, failed to produce that inflationary scenario, but yet you're just going to magically produce it. Boom, COVID. Oh, all right. Okay. Got your inflationary scenario out of that. Got it up elevated, moderately above 2% right now. Exactly what it is. Like right here, guys, look. This is called the Statement on Long-Run Goals and Monetary Policy Strategies. This is going to change this year. In fact, in a few months. They're going through the review of it right now. I am going to look for these particular words that I'm about ready to state. This is what I am looking for in the new new statement on long-run goals and monetary policy strategies. Again, this will be coming out in a couple of months. This is the words that I am looking for in order to anchor long-term inflation expectations at this level. The committee seeks to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time. And therefore judges that following periods when inflation has been running persistently below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. Those words have been repeated over and over again within the Federal Reserve statements. Moderately above 2% for some time. They are making up for the fact that they failed to achieve the 2% target over the previous 10 years. Right? I mean, if you don't believe it, there's something called the makeup strategy. Literally, how robust are makeup strategies to the key alternative assumptions? Right. Says here, makeup strategies work best when public understands, believes, and reacts to policymakers' commitment to offset misses in inflation from the 2% objective in the future. In particular, makeup strategies are most powerful when policymakers can influence the public's inflation expectations. Right. In doing so, policymakers face a dynamic. They must maintain long-run inflation expectations around 2%. The long-run inflation expectations at 2%. Inflation expectations are well anchored at 2%. The 2% inflation, 2% anchor, 2% target, 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%. Right? They say it over and over and over again. They got to well communicate that. Got to make sure that it's anchored in your head. 2%. That's what they're going for. A 2% inflation rate, right? Nothing else. Even though it's moderately above 2% right now, but 2%. Just remember that. That's what they do. Okay. In particular, makeup strategies are most powerful when policymakers can influence the public's inflation expectations. In doing so, policymakers face a dynamic tension. They must maintain long-run inflation expectations around 2% objective, while at the same time moving shorter-run inflation expectations in response to the new strategy. Now, what I found interesting about this is that somebody questioned Jerome Powell recently on that. After his speech, he was doing a press Q&A session afterwards. And they asked him about the makeup strategy, like straight up, asked him about the makeup strategy right there in front of everybody. They asked him about the makeup strategy. You know what he did? This is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I could not believe it when I seen it, right? In fact, I think I have a video that we did talking about this and showing it. What happened is that when he went to answer the question, he said the makeup strategy essentially became, I can't remember exactly the words, became irrelevant because of COVID. And there was a giggle that came across the damn audience. Like there was, I don't know about the whole audience, there was a couple of people, but you could hear a goddamn chuckle. And I'm like, whoa, what was that? Like, what was, like, go and listen to it. Go back, just the recent speech that he gave. Right, he gave. Go and listen to the Q&A sessions afterwards. It was literally within like the first 5 minutes of the Q&A session, so you don't even have to listen to that long of it. Listen to the part where they ask him about the makeup strategy. Listen to how he denies it, like basically says, oh, that thing became irrelevant. We didn't need that thing anymore because all of a sudden inflation was all of a sudden running rampant. And he was just like, because of COVID, right? He says like, yeah, the makeup strategy essentially became irrelevant because of COVID. And there was a chuckle. And I'm like, no way. But yep, sure enough, right? Because they didn't need the makeup strategy, it became irrelevant. They didn't need it anymore because COVID was causing this inflationary scenario that they were looking for. You see how this works, guys? Like when you do this every single day, like I have, you don't like all this other stuff that happens. Like it's important. Don't get me wrong. Like all the rest of the issues that are taking place are very important. People's jobs are at stake. Right? I can't stop the way that they are going to do things. The only thing I can do is talk about how it is that it's going down. By internalizing this information, you protect yourself. If you can see it coming ahead of time, then you know that, man, maybe my job is reliant upon particular decisions of the administration. I should protect myself from that. Not how do I protect my job? You can't protect your job. There's no way. Like, you can't get everybody to protect your job for you. The only thing you can do is protect your position. And if your position may be compromised by the government and what it is, then you need to figure out something that can protect you from that. This is the point of these videos. You got to understand your position. My position isn't reliant like that. Right? I keep my living expenses are really low. I'm going to be out of debt soon. Like I have just a little tiny bit of credit card debt that I'm going to be out of soon. I'm going to be all done with that stuff. And I'm going to be sitting tight going, okay, when is the bottom going to be in? Because I'm going to start dollar cost averaging again. Right now, I am not. These are my decisions. Your decisions are going to be much different. Let's go check out that super chat real quick. Because I see these comments just flying by. I'm going to go up there and find my menu thing doesn't find. Okay, here we go. William G. Atheist number 1. Thank you so much for the $5 Canadian. I am coming back to it again. The days of greenback dominance are now numbered. One further, this will crush the U.S. economy. EU is planning for it. Now, William, I doubt it, man. And I really appreciate the $5 Canadian, man. I really do. And I totally get how it is that the emotional feelings behind it are really ramping up, and you're thinking, man, all these people are going to give up and give the finger to the dollar and say, man, we're done with it. The problem is that there's nothing else that they can use. There's nothing else that they can use, bro. Like literally, there are debts that are due in dollars that are going to be due in dollars, that there is nothing else that can fulfill the role of the dollar because there's nothing else available. Not in the abundance of the dollar. It just simply cannot be knocked off its throne because there's nothing there. The only thing that can happen is a complete and utter collapse, and nobody's going to be like, yeah, woohoo! Nobody's going to be like that when it happens because everybody's going to be starving and misery and pain and suffering and war and chaos, and there's nothing going to be pleasant about it. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm in a position in which that if it does happen, I think might be able to handle. I don't know. We'll wait and see. I believe that I can handle that kind of situation because I've actually theorized on what it is that I'm going to do in case something like that happens, but I do not wish for it. And I do not think it's going to take place. Right? What I do think is going to take place is this continuous grind that we are now facing, considering that the dollar is the world reserve currency that has grown in such massive proportions that has now created dollar-denominated debt that exists outside the world in such proportions that there is no way that there is another currency out there that can be used to alleviate what it is that the dollar is doing. It's just not out there. Right? Thanks again for I appreciate you, William, man. I really do. Thank you so much for the $5, man. They are working on it today. Did Trump's tariffs and Bitcoin Bretton Woods? I think it did. Did Trump's tariffs? Bretton Woods. I think it did. No, here's the thing. William, I understand the philosophy behind it all. I understand that there are things in existence. Okay? What I am talking about is, this is hard to wrap your head around. I get it. You want to do a transaction, right? Say you want to do a transaction in gold, right? So all of us here in my little, like, let's just break it down to my little neighborhood right here, right? We're going to imagine my little neighborhood is the entire world, okay? And all my neighbors here, right? We all have exactly equal amounts of gold. Right? And we're going to do transactions in gold. Now, there's a problem that's immediately going to start being faced. Number one is that the individual who is the most industrious of us all, who wants to save the money, will then start to hoard the gold, denying the rest of us the ability to have it. Okay, so you see the problem that's starting to exist already? Just simply one person being more industrious than anybody else is going to start accumulating more than what they had originally started with. And it's going to start denying the rest of the people out there that ability to have that gold to do transactions with. So then you deny the economy, the neighborhood, the countries, the world, the ability to do transactions because an individual is hoarding onto it, right? If it was out there, then that gold can be doing transactions. You and me and everybody else can be doing transactions with it. Somebody comes up and says, hey, man, I want you to buy my carrots. And they'll be like, dude, I'd love to buy the carrots. Why don't you buy the carrots? I ain't got no gold. Why ain't you got no gold? There ain't no gold around. That dude over there, he's got it all. Right? That guy's got it all. So what ends up happening when you have unlimited amounts of currency that you can print up is you have an unlimited amount of ability to do transactions. And that's unfortunately the case that we are now facing. In the way that it is unfortunate is because you can't replace the dollar with it. You can't replace the dollar with anything else to do all those transactions because there's nothing available to do it with. You get it? Like, I mean, even if you took all the transactions or all the currency of the BRICS nations, say, hey, we got all these BRICS nations currency, do transactions still this much comparatively to what the dollar is doing. And on top of it, none of those BRICS nations want to provide the currency. They may say it, like people might say it out there, but none of them want to be a debtor nation. They all want to be industrious nations. They all want to be producers and savers, which means that you do not want to be the debtor nation that's providing the world with a currency. That's going to drive you into ever increasing amounts of trade deficits where you're pushing dollars out. That's exactly the situation we are now facing. We're not going to be able, they can't replace the dollar. I don't care how much you theorize on using Bitcoin or gold. It's a limited currency. You are going to create situations in which that the most industrious nation is going to hoard it all for themselves, i.e. America, right? I mean, we produced all the world's greatest stuff, sent it out to the world, accumulated the gold, and then told them we were not going to redistribute it back out to them when they started to demand it. And if we were to try and attempt to go back on a gold standard, we would immediately export it for all the production of the world. And then it would be gone. And we would be poor and broke. What we face today is what we're going to be facing tomorrow. No doubt about it. Like, no doubt about it. Right? The evolution will change. Right? We may move into cryptocurrency type of application, stablecoin things, which it seems to be happening right now. But there's no way you're removing the dollar. It's not going to happen. All right? When the dollar fails, it's going to be utter chaos and misery. and pain and suffering. It ain't going to be a simple transition over. And I mean, if that's what you believe is happening, man, whatever, man, I used to believe that. See, there was a time that I did believe that. If you had asked me 15 years ago how much longer does the dollar have, I would have said it would have been over by now. I would have said, nope, there is no more way that the dollar is going to exist. It's on its way out. Quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 is going to completely destroy it. And I knew that was going to be the case. I knew the New World Order was coming after me. I knew exactly why I was so broke and poor and had nothing in my life. And it was because of the government and the way that they conduct themselves, infringing upon my life, taking away my freedoms, holding me down my entire life. I knew for a fact that's exactly what was going down, man. I could preach it like you wouldn't believe. And then I one day said, you know what? F that. I put the alcohol down, I put the phone down, I put everything down, and I stopped. I just stopped completely. Right? I barely made it to work, and I went home and I did my little farming agricultural thing that I was trying to get going. I kept very quiet to myself. And when I came out of that, I said to myself, just follow the money. Don't worry about all that conspiracy, New World Order crap. Just follow the money. That's where the answers will lie. Just follow that money and you will get it. So I started following that money. I started breaking down monetary policy. I started getting into the Federal Reserve speeches. I started coming up with this credible threat theory, and my life did nothing but get better and better and better. I exited the New World Order out of my thoughts. I said, they ain't important anymore. I'm not giving them any more power. Right? I'm not in fear of that anymore, because living in that fear is what kept me down. That's what keeps you suppressed and depressed. Right? Once you give that stuff up, you can move on, man. You can move on and you can start acquiring much more in your life, and you can look at this stuff for what it really is. Right? You can understand that the dollar sucks. I get it, man. I don't like it just as much as anybody else. Look, here, I got my End the Fed hat right here. Here, let me swap this one out. Uneducated for the End the Fed. There we go. Here, does that make it better? How about that one? All right. See, it's not a matter of like trying to end the Fed. It's not a matter of trying to convince the government. It's not a matter of any of that stuff out there. It's a matter of figuring this stuff out for yourself so that you can make the most and right appropriate decisions. That's it. There's all there is to it. All right, let's see here. Buffalo Blanco, thank you for the $4.99. What are your thoughts with funds having the most sells of stocks yesterday in the last 10 years? And retail the most acquisitions? I don't know, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There's a lot of chaos, and who knows? Like, the market's volatility is not surprising to me whatsoever. Like, I mean, I don't really get that concerned about it. And to see these crazy wild swings is not really that surprising. I mean, to me it's not. I mean, maybe to other people it is, and especially if you're like really dependent upon like the stock value being elevated, like retirement funds or something of that nature, or maybe a stock trader or something of that nature. I don't know. I mean, in that fashion, I could see where it's very concerning and it lights people up and it becomes the most important thing in their entire life. For me, it's a very minimal concern, because like I guess I just don't care. I mean, I care, but I just don't care about whether or not it's like goes up, down, or sideways. Because to me, that's gonna be like, I have about the same level of concern about it I do over Bitcoin or anything else that I have out there. My fear level is almost non-existent in just about anything. And maybe that's a bit of a, like I was talking about it yesterday or whatever, day before. That might be a little bit of a downfall for me. Like that's like maybe an inhibiting, like I should have a little bit of fear, but I really don't. Like I just don't. Like I have been so close to losing so much stuff and all that other stuff. It's like I just don't. It's like, oh, you're gonna take a bunch of stuff away. I was like, I ain't got that much stuff, so whatever. That's literally the way I feel about it. Other people, they don't. They have a lot of stuff and it's real important to them and they give it a lot of meaning. So to me, it gives me, I think, a different kind of view of things, where it's just like, oh, wow, that's pretty dramatic, isn't it? But a lot of people are going to be pissed about that. And that's literally the way I feel about it. It was just like, whatever. If it did it continuously and you saw like a dramatic drop, it goes from, all the way down to 20, 15 or something like that, and it's really devastating, and then people are just absolutely losing their mind, and, all the, like rise of suicide kind of things or something, and that's like scary kind of stuff. But right now, I mean, to me, that was like a slap in the face to people, and I just laugh at it. It was just like, well, you should be somewhat protected, right? I mean, you should like be in a position in which that, if something like this happens, it shouldn't be the end of the world to you. If it is, then you might want to reconsider how it is that you have positioned yourself. So like when an event like this takes place, it isn't that critical or that painful for you. I mean, me personally. All right. And again, I know that everybody's going to make that different, going to look at that differently. All right, JRGUSE. Germany is talking about pulling out their entire gold reserves from the U.S. I wonder what would happen if they said that they don't trust U.S. stability anymore and demand all their gold immediately. Didn't they do that like 15 years ago? I'm pretty sure that story is rehashed. Like this is something that they attempted to do like quite a while ago, was to repatriate, like to bring back all the gold or bring back a significant portion of it. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is something that they were attempting to do in the past. So, and didn't like a bunch of like tungsten bars show up in it? Like I could remember there, like it seems to me like there's like this controversial story about Germany getting some of their gold back from America, and it was filled with tungsten. And now I could be wrong on that, but anyway. Mr. Balloon Pimp. All right, good luck, beloved. At some point, you have to just walk away. Hope you get one day. Get it one day. All right. UE, thanks for constantly going over the credible threat theory. The coming years look to be rough, and living below our means is so important. How are you personally preparing for the next recession? I tell you guys all the time, man. I mean, I'm not hiding any secrets. Right? There is no secrets. Like I don't like have some secret I plan or anything in the background, right? I tell you exactly what it is that I'm doing. I told you like the positions that I've taken in stocks. I've told you about what I do with the cryptocurrencies. I told you about taking positions in silver and gold. Know how to use firearms. Canning is the most important thing that you need to learn for a skill. If you don't have a skill, go and learn to can. Like, I mean, I go over this stuff constantly. I don't have any secrets, guys. You all gonna have to prepare for yourself and figure out what it is that you got going on in your life. And if you really just don't know, like you just like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know. Say it's safe, gold. I don't guns. What? I don't. Go learn to can. Right? You don't have to be crazy about it. Just watch a video on canning. Here, watch a video on canning carrots. Go down to your local, farm and feed store, buy some canning supplies, the canning supplies you need. Go to the store, buy some carrots, can the carrots, learn to do that, and you got a skill. You're learning a skill. All right. Not only is it fun to do it, but then you have a skill that you can use. All right. So it's just like you get rewarded for your afternoon of being bored, not knowing what to do. Now you got something to do and you got a skill from it. So just go do that, right? I mean, everybody's going to be individual. If you have no savings, what do you do? Like, I mean, I don't know what position everybody is in. I mean, are you like, somebody who's just like, dude, I live in my car. There ain't no way I'm canning anything. Go down to like, if you have a little bit of money and you want to try and start saving, go down to the local coin store and see if he'll sell you some silver for a decent price. Go and look up what the spot price is. It fell dramatically. You never know what it is that the coin dealer is going to do for you. Go and start buying up on some silver, right? I don't know. I don't know what you're supposed to do. All right? I just know what I'm trying to do and what it is that I recognize going on out there and how it is that I position myself and things that I don't get scared about. I don't know how many people came to me and it was just like, dude, do I need to buy my lumber package right now before the tariffs? Oh, and I was just like, don't stress it, man. Don't stress it. Listen, like, we got there's no movement in lumber. I'm watching the lumber futures. They kind of got up there a little bit, but nothing crazy is happening yet. Don't stress it, right? Stop stressing the whole idea of this all. Now, there could have been people who went out there and dumped their money into a lumber package that was elevated, panic buying that lumber package, only to find out now that we're seeing lumber absolutely dumping out in the futures market. Right. I mean, it had one of the biggest drops that I've seen in 2 days, and I've seen it in a very long time, considering we were at what, like close to 670 per thousand or something. We're down under 500 or down under 600 or like at 590. I mean, wow, what a move, right? Now, I guess like for a lot of people, it's probably not incredible, but because lumber's pretty boring. But for me, that was a kind of exciting day, to see that happening. Yeah, and it was all speculation. There was nothing that was taking place. That's important. Hey, William, thank you again, man. Thank you so much for the support for the channel, man. I really appreciate it. If retaliatory tariffs are not removed, how high is the U.S. inflation rate going? And remember, your dollar is falling. Well, here's the thing. Go and look at U.S. Treasuries right now. I'm not trying to be accusatory because I really appreciate the support and everything. But when you assume that the dollar is falling, look at U.S. Treasuries right now. Those things are rising. Yields are falling, prices are going up. U.S. Treasuries are another way of saying dollars because U.S. Treasuries are used for transactions around the world. It's a safe haven. So this isn't falling. This is rising. Right? This is U.S. Treasuries rising. When you see those yields falling, that's U.S. Treasury bond prices moving up, which means that people are buying them. Right? So this is again like it's a very complicated world to try and internalize when you have so much chaos that has taken place with the way that it is articulated out there for the people to receive. It puts this fear and uncertainty in you. You must internalize it for yourself so that you don't hear the fear and uncertainty when the information is being delivered. I don't. When people they talk about all this like BRICS nations stuff, and I hear it even like in my personal, people come to me and tell me, and I'm like, you heard that from some YouTuber out there. You don't have that information personally. Like you didn't dig that up and come up with this information about the BRICS nations. I mean maybe you did. I mean who's ever watching this video. But the person that I'm talking to is asking me about this, and I'm like, you heard this from another YouTuber out there. Did he leave links down in the description for you to go follow so that you can internalize that information for yourself like I do it? Or at least tell you where to go, right here, I mean, I tell you all these speeches and stuff. I tell you where the titles, the dates and stuff like that. So if you wanted to go see it, you can go Google it yourself. But ultimately, if you're not internalizing that information in a direct fashion from the source itself, then you are getting it filtered through propaganda. Even me refiltering this information to you, right? It's my interpretation of the information. That's why it's so important to you go and internalize it for yourself, to go and read it for yourself. That's why I give you the links. That's why I tell you the sources. That's why. So when people say, dude, I don't know about what you're saying, I'm like, hey, you don't have to believe me. In fact, I'd rather you don't believe me and go and read it for yourself. That's what I would prefer. That way, the information is truly internalized in a way that isn't misinterpreted by what I said or by my opinion. Right? I mean, I keep saying it over and over again. I wish people would take on this credible threat theory because I know there's people out there who could break this stuff down better than I can. Right? I know there is. I mean, I'm just the uneducated economist. I didn't go to school. I didn't do college courses. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just got very obsessed about what it was taking place inside of monetary policy. I followed the money and I kept reading these speeches and I'm like, why do they write these things to be so confusing? And I just kept reading them over and over again until I could finally start to understand what it was that they were saying. And when I started seeing what they were saying, and I'm like, you guys are communicating to each other, but you're not communicating to the people. You communicate to the people in a different way. I can see your communication to each other. I got all these speeches here where you communicate to each other, but then when you get out there on the mainstream, it's a whole different story that you're talking about. Or it's at least it's received by the audience, by the receiver of the information. It's received differently than the way that they are communicating it to each other. Just the simple idea of moderately above 2% for some time. Right? I mean, it's just here. What was this? This is Michelle Bowman. What speech was this? April 5th, 2024. So, what, a year ago? Wow, a year ago today. Right? A year ago today. Another notable change to the strategy statement was the adoption of some refer to as asymmetric flexible average inflation targeting. Isn't that a mouthful? Asymmetric flexible average inflation targeting, a temporary price level targeting. Specifically, the new statement noted that in order to anchor long-term inflation expectation at its 2% goal, the committee seeks to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, and therefore judges that following periods when inflation has been running persistently below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. All right? I mean, that was stated a year ago by Michelle Bowman. Here, you want to hear it again? I mean, you heard it out of the statement on, what was that? God, I always get that wrong. What was it? The statement on long-run goals and monetary policy strategies. You heard it in there. Where else? Here we go. The report to Congress, monetary policy report. This was given February 7th of 2024. In that, it says inflation rate over the long run is primarily determined by monetary policy, and hence the committee has the ability to specify a long-run goal for inflation. The committee reaffirms its judgment that inflation at a rate of 2% as measured by the annual change in the policy in the price index for personal consumption expenditures is most consistent over the long run with the Federal Reserve's statutory mandate. The committee judges that long-term inflation expectations are well anchored at 2%, fosters price stability, and a moderate long-term interest rate, and hence the committee's ability to promote maximum employment in the face of significant economic disturbances. Here we go. In order to anchor long-term inflation expectations at this level, the committee seeks to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, and therefore judges that following periods when inflation has been running persistently below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. Okay, so that was written February 7th of 2025. Report to Congress, right? The report to Congress on monetary policy. Just a couple months ago. There's no 2% target. I don't get it. Like, that's the gaslighting event that took place that everybody has now convinced themselves of, and why it is that 99% of the people are getting it wrong. It's why they don't get monetary policy right, and it's why I keep saying that I have it right and everybody wrong, is because everybody is talking about a 2% target as opposed to a flexible average inflation targeting, which is truly what the Federal Reserve is after. And since nobody seems to get it right, I just keep coming out here and telling you, and I'm the crazy one who doesn't know what's going on with the Federal Reserve, even though I constantly use the Federal Reserve's own words against them. Right? All right. Okay, I'm sorry. The retaliatory tariffs are not removed. How high will inflation? See, this is the thing. Okay. That's a good question, William. Let's get back to that real quick, because if the retaliatory inflation or retaliatory tariffs are not removed, then the inflation, how high is that going to get? It's going to get very, very high. Now, here's the thing, William. That is actually something that I have been theorizing on and cannot prove, and I don't want to come out as the conspiracy theorist who's going to say this, but go ahead and take it for what it is. What if, right? What if, right? They decide to remove the tariffs? Like, I'm talking Trump and his boys. They remove the tariff, but the retaliatory tariffs stay in place. What if? So now think about this scenario for just a minute. There's something called Triffin's dilemma. Now, Triffin's dilemma is the idea that the United States, as the world reserve currency, has to be custodian of that world reserve currency, has to figure out a way to get the dollars out there to the world. So now, as the world denominated debt demands dollars, that's people out there who have written debts that are due in dollars. Right? It doesn't have anything to do with the United States. Doesn't have anything to do with our government. Doesn't have anything to do with corporations, the banks, the people. Nothing. Doesn't have anything to do with the United States at all. These are debts that are written in dollars. I, Joe from Ireland, owe Hank from Spain $50. That contract gets created. Doesn't have anything to do with anybody out there except for those two dudes, and the fact that the contract has been created and that contract is going to demand dollars to be alleviated. What's funny about it is that contract starts getting used as dollars as well. They can literally create dollars out of the United States. Doesn't have anything to do with us. We are not creating this. The Fed is not creating it. Individuals are doing this on their own, creating dollars outside of the United States. Now, how is it that the dollar is going to fulfill that contract if you have a problem getting dollars out of the United States? If that dollar does not get out of the United States to fulfill that contract, the demand for dollars will increase. If the demand for dollars increase, what's going to happen to your domestic suppliers here in the United States who supply foreign entities out there? It's going to get very difficult for them, as those foreign entities will have to come up with ever-increasing amounts of dollars in order to buy your goods. It's a burden on the domestic suppliers to foreigners. This is important to understand, all right? And so to think about how it is that you can get dollars out of the United States to the world means that you run trade deficits. It's the easiest way. This is Triffin's dilemma. You import stuff and you export dollars. So you have to run trade deficits if you're going to supply the world with the dollars. Well, what if trade deficits are pushing your consumers to the limit? Debt-saturated consumers in the United States cannot increase their consumption in order to get the dollars out of the United States. How do you get these dollars out? You have a bunch of tariffs, counter tariffs, remove the tariffs. Counter tariffs take even more dollars away from the United States. Problem solved. Again, my conspiracy mind spins that way. Now, I'm not saying that's what's happening, but it very well could. We have to wait and see. Negotiations, don't know what's happening. But if they wanted to get dollars out of the United States and you couldn't increase the consumption by getting people to buy more stuff, then maybe you can just charge more for that stuff to get dollars out. Here, you want to know, this is how far back this problem goes. Take this to November 21st of 2002. This is how far back the problem goes. This is what I am talking about right now. November 21st, 2002, Ben Bernanke gave a speech called Deflation, making sure it doesn't happen here. Deflation, making sure it doesn't happen, right? Because they want inflation, just like old Powell was saying, got to have that old inflation. However, going to be painful for the people. Well, for some people anyway. It's going to be annoying for some people. It's going to be really painful for some people. Okay. The Fed can inject money into the economy in still other ways. For example, the Fed has the authority to buy foreign government debt, as well as domestic government debt. How many times have you heard the Federal Reserve say that the United States is on an unsustainable debt path? That they cannot continue down this idea of quantitative easing that's going to send the United States on an unsustainable debt path. Meaning if they continue to print money and buying those U.S. treasuries from the government, how are they going to figure out a way to buy something to inject money out there to the system? Ben Bernanke says, well, there is all that foreign government debt out there. And what does he have to say? Potentially, this class of asset offers huge scope for operations as the quantity of foreign assets eligible for purchase by the Fed is several times the stock of U.S. government debt. You see this? This is how the Federal Reserve is looking at the future, because they've already talked about it. Like, it's kind of funny how manifesting things into realities really starts with a thought and almost saying it out loud, and you speak it into existence. Ben Bernanke knows that there's issues coming up. He knew it 20 years ago. The speech was given in 2020. Guys. November 21st of 2002. Sorry, November 21st of 2002. Right? Over 20 years ago. And he knew that there was going to come a situation in which that trying to inject money into the system was going to be very burdensome upon the United States government. That they would be on an unsustainable debt path. But the idea of buying into foreign assets, well, potentially this class of asset offers a huge scope for Fed operations. We haven't seen it happen yet. Is there a time coming? Who knows? But that's kind of what I think. How do you get the money out? How do you get the money out of the United States? You can buy stuff. People will keep saying, oh, we need to get the money back into the United States. That's what Donald Trump is trying to do. And I'm like, that's a good one. Yeah, right. Whatever. You know, that's okay. Sure he is. All right. You know. All right, Jake Northwest, $5. Is inflation deflation used to keep the system from falling, or in order to gain more power, money, power, like the founding father quote? Is inflation used? How do you use inflation? All right, how do you use inflation? I gotta mow my lawn. The neighbor's mowing his lawn. He's making me jealous. My lawn's getting really long. See, this is where I think about it. Like, how do you use inflation? When they say they use inflation, right? Like, I look at they as who? Like the bank, the government, the individual there? Like, who exactly is they? You know, because I'm like, I'm a little lost on that part. I see inflationary pressures coming, but for the reasons that I see them are much different from what other people. They're like, oh, the government needs to alleviate debt. That's why they cause us deflation or inflation or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, that's probably part of like a lot of it, like the way that people use it. But to understand that it's just like kind of like an economic force that is happening out there, right? Just because they print up a bunch of money doesn't mean it's going to cause inflation. People misinterpret the money printer go burr, prices go up, because it makes sense that if you have more money in circulation, then you're going to have higher prices. And even when you read through Cantillon's essay, he describes it in that fashion, but it's not the quantity of money that is increasing the prices. It's the quantity of money that's increasing the consumption. And that's important to understand, because you can print up a bunch of money, but if that money sits in the bank and never makes it into circulation, it's not going to create an inflationary scenario. Much like what the Federal Reserve was facing back in November of 2018 when you find monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world. And in that speech, he said that today we face an altogether different set. This is coming from John Williams. He said, today we face an altogether different set of problems stemming from a very low neutral interest rate, and that is the short-term real interest rate consistent with an economy operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation. Ironically, the problem we need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. All right. Again, it's like, I mean, to me, I think about it all in the position that you have taken based on the information that is at hand. Like, is it a good or bad thing? I don't know. Are they using it for good or bad purposes? I mean, I'm sure that if you want to theorize on it, you can explain in great detail and probably write, several books on the idea on how it is that government uses this. Yeah, and you'll probably be right. But to understand that inflation comes from the added consumption causing supply-demand imbalances, and just keep it as simple as that, then you can come up with all the excuses and reasonings for that added consumption causing the prices to go up. Was it from a bunch of money being printed? Was it from added credit? Was it from, fear of, a supply chain breakdown, an actual supply chain breakdown that causes supply-demand imbalances? Whatever it is, it's a supply-demand imbalance. Because it's not necessarily money printer go off. When the money printer goes off 1, 2, 3, and 4, quantitative easing that created an insane amount of debt, it quadrupled the Fed's balance sheet. It didn't create an inflationary scenario. This is what they were facing in 2018. John Williams just said it. Today we face an altogether different set of problems stemming from a very low neutral interest rate. That is the short-term real interest rate consistent with an economy operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation. Didn't create inflation. Ironically, the problem we need to solve these days is a risk of inflation that is persistently too low. rather than too high? Do we have inflation that seems too high? I mean, just say yes or no, right? Do we have inflation that is persistently too high? Right? Yes? Okay. Well, that was the problem that they needed to solve. No kidding. Okay, well, I mean, if they said this 7 years ago, maybe we should probably keep on track with the strategy because they wanted this to happen. And then you go and find that Jerome Powell was saying, we know that inflation is really annoying for the rich, but it's really painful for the poor. However, inflation that is persistently too low can be really painful, really bad for the economy. So, sorry, poor people, pain and suffering ahead. Before we even knew that there was going to be inflation, we were telling you, pain's coming. Right? Isn't that what he said? Let me read it again. I mean, it wasn't too far off from that. Right? The persistent undershoot of inflation from our 2% long-run objective, the persistent undershoot of inflation from 2% objective, again, this was 2020, is a cause for concern. Many find it counterintuitive that the Fed would want to push up inflation. Yeah, I would find it counterintuitive if you would want to push up inflation. After all, low and stable inflation is essential for a well-functioning economy. Yeah, I agree with you, pal. It sure is. And we are certainly mindful of higher prices for essential items such as food, gasoline, and shelter add to the burdens faced by many families, especially those at the lower end, those struggling with jobs and incomes. However, sorry guys, I know the pain and suffering is going to be massive for you people, especially those who lose their jobs and those who are at the lower income. However, inflation that is persistently too low, it's too low, can pose serious risk for the economy. They don't want it too low, they want it too high. Otherwise, it has serious risks to the economy. Over and over again, I say it over and over again. I am not going to let it go. I'm the only one who does this. 99% of the people got it wrong. They think that the Fed's still trying to get it down. They don't know that the Fed was going for persistently high inflation. They didn't know that. Nobody knew it, even though Jerome Powell straight up told us. They even said it in the statement on long-run goals and monetary policy strategies, their consensus statement. Okay? But every single news article you've ever read talks about a 2% target because it's pure propaganda. Every bit of it. That's why I don't trust it. That's why I look at the news, I read the news articles, and I try to talk about what it is that they are communicating to the people out there, and then use that information. What is it that they are trying to deliver as far as the information? Don't listen to the information itself. That stuff is garbage. What is it that they're trying to communicate? Are they trying to communicate a weak economy? Are they trying to communicate elevated inflation expectations? Are they trying to communicate better jobs market? Are they trying to communicate what? Right? Don't worry about the interest rate adjustments. It's not really an effective tool. Besides, even if it was, it would take 6 months to a year before it would have any kind of real impact to the economy. But the communication about it, super important. That has a direct impact on the economy, and it's absorbed quickly by the markets into price assets depending on what phrases that they use. And if you don't believe me, remember, that was stated directly from Jefferson. Right? Where was that said? Let me bring that one up. What did he say? Using textual analysis, high-frequency asset price data, the high-frequency central bank communication data, all this data points, right? This research shows that investors' reaction to specific sentences communicated by the central bank are quickly incorporated into asset prices. Tell me that is not another way of saying we manipulate you by giving you specific sentences into the markets to cause asset prices to go one way or the other. I mean, he just straight up just said it. Like, yeah, we're going to tell you what it is that you need to hear in order to cause those prices to go one way or the other. Like, I mean, how else do you need to hear it? That's what they're saying. Policymakers know that their communications are likely to affect the course of short-term interest rates, other asset prices, and the associated economic outlook, resulting in an easing or tightening of financial conditions. They know their communications. They know the communications will do it. This was given, is this the one? Yeah. February 21st of 2025, just a couple of months ago. Reading between the lines, textual analysis of central bank communications. You think there will be a market rally or some positive news or something just going lower and lower with doom and gloom into recession? Ed, thank you so much for the $5 or the five, what is that, euros or something? I can't tell what the symbol is. Thank you. I really appreciate the support for the channel. Like everything you guys are doing. I mean, we got 551 people right now. 236 of you have gone and hit that thumbs up button. Hit that thumbs up button. That's another way you can support the Uneducated Economist. And thank you all for the super chats. Now I need to go read the comment again. All right. Oops. There it is. The market rally, positive news to me. I don't have positive negative view. It's just that, because that's the meaning that you're giving it. It's just the meaning that you give it. It's like, to me, it's not a positive or negative thing. It's just an is. It's a neutral. It's my reaction and the meaning that I give it. I mean, you could look at this and go like, oh man, this is the worst day ever. And other people would be like, woohoo, opportunity. Right? I mean, so which one is it? Is it worst day ever or is it opportunity? Because like, again, it's the meaning that you're deciding to give this thing. You know, I mean, if you're asking the question, is it going to go up, down, or sideways? I really don't know, right? I mean, I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen going into the future. I know uncertainty raises like the fear part of things and usually pushes people out of stocks and into bonds. But, you know, I mean, is that going to be the case this time? We got a lot of fear and uncertainty around the dollar itself. I mean, if you take in the dollar milkshake theory, you could really see where the dollars and gold could rise together. You know, there's all kinds of you know, theorized possibilities that could come to the future. Again, like, I don't look at any one thing as being like, this is the ticket, right? I don't look at cryptocurrencies, gold, and any, like real estate, none of that. But I'm in positions in all these things all the time. You know, I mean, I would only assume, like, if you were to ask me, is there going to be more fear and uncertainty going into the future? Absolutely. I think that they're playing this game for quite some time. And so if you can continue on pushing this elevated inflation expectation, then you'll raise that neutral interest rate. If you raise the neutral interest rate over time, then you'll make the economy less restricted. What seems like a very painful experience right now may very well turn into more accommodative position, or less restrictive position is what I should say, not accommodating, right? But less restrictive position. Like, this is a very real thing that could take place. People wonder why we had such a resilient economy all the time. Well, it's like, well, if you could raise the neutral interest rate, and if you can raise the inflation expectation, and you can do all these things within the economy, then you might actually find an experience that is counterintuitive to what you believe that would happen. I mean, how many people say, well, interest rates go down, housing market's going to go through the roof? Well, interest rates went up and housing prices went up. It's like, you can't use this logic like that anymore. Things within the economy are no longer operating in the fashion in which that we could look back and say, hey, the Federal Reserve used to operate this way and this was the way it would impact. Yeah, because they would operate with interest rate adjustments and very little communication. Now, the interest rate adjustments aren't the effective tool and the communications are. That's why nothing seems to work. The, you know, inverted yield curve, the SOM rule, all these things that would typically indicate a recession are not functioning in the way that we had remembered them functioning, because the Federal Reserve is not functioning the way they used to do it. All right? Although most people don't know that. And that's the way they're able to get away with it, is because most people don't see that. They don't understand. Instead, they remain incredibly confused about what it is that's happening out there. And it's not like they're giving them any kind of real guidance into what it is that they're doing. They literally tell them, hey, we got this 2% goal. Not that you would know what the goal is, but yeah, we got this 2% goal, right? Because the people don't know. They don't know that they're going for a 2% average inflation rate over time, where moderately above 2% is the actual objective. They don't know that. Nobody knows that. Everybody thinks that the Fed is going down for 2% target. So they think that they're still trying to do what? Be in position where they're at, to sit on their hands, to do nothing, to literally sit back like this, go like, no, boys, don't do nothing yet. We got some time yet. Let them work. And it's just like, isn't it time for the Fed to do something? No, just keep doing, just do nothing. I don't. Maybe somebody, you know what? Maybe do some balance sheet adjustments, and we could say we did something. Okay. No interest rate adjustments. Right? I mean, that's what's happening here. All right. Oh, man, where are we at here? Okay, William, man, you really support the channel today, brother. Thank you. Ireland and India have already announced they will accept dollar-denominated debt in other currencies. Can you tell I'm an angry Canadian? Ireland and India have already announced they will accept dollar-denominated debt in other currencies. So, again, let's take an example for just a minute, okay? Russia and India did a deal inside of rupees, right? Where they were doing the deals in oils because Russia was just like, hey, we've got this issue going on with the whole dollar thing, and we can't participate in the whole dollar system. So, but we need to sell some oil, and India's like, okay, yeah, we'll totally buy your oil. We'll use rupees. Right? Russia was cool with the rupees. They ended up with a bunch of rupees. Now what do? Right? Because not everybody else in the world wants rupees. So they could do some deals, like they can do some deals, like, and even good deals, like, hey, we got these rupees, and you take rupees, okay. But they had so many rupees that they didn't know what to do with them because not everybody's going to take rupees. Like some people will. There is some deals that happen, right? But the majority of their rupees sit in their bank with no place to go, except for back to India. Now, Russia's looking at it saying, well, I want to buy stuff from these people, but I have rupees, and they may accept a little bit of my rupee, but they're not going to accept rupees 100%. They don't want them. Why? Because nobody else wants them either. They want a little bit. But what everybody wants is dollars, guaranteed. So although we can do a little deals, and they will accept some, right? What they're not going to do is be able to use all those rupees. So what they end up having to do is take those rupees and go back to India or sell them for dollars or sell them for another currency that somebody wants. And by selling those rupees, it's like setting them on fire as the value of the rupee begins to fall, the more they try to sell it. This is the problem with not using a single reserve currency, is that this situation will happen every time. So you can go ahead and set up the deals, you can write the contracts, you can make it happen. But the level of operations in which that the dollar is serving, there is no competition for. Zero. None. The competition is insignificant. It is like not even present. All right? Does it exist? Sure. I mean, that's it right there. What is the dollar doing? Everything. You know what it's kind of like doing? It's like literally saying, okay, I only want to breathe fresh air. I don't want to breathe the toxic air, right? I don't want to breathe the toxic air out there, known as the dollar. I don't want to breathe any of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sit in my house, and that's as far as it's going to go. And everything that happens within my house, that's it. That's all my entire existence, right? But the moment that I want to step out of my house, I have to start dealing with dollars. I have to start breathing the toxic air. Right? You can be filtered. You can be in your house, be safe and sound and all that other stuff that's going on inside of there. But if you want to operate inside of the rest of the world, you're going to have to go out there and breathe the toxic air. It's the same thing as the dollar situation. It's a great analogy for it. That's all I can say, man. Right? I mean, that's the way it's going down. I don't like it this way. Don't think I'm trying to defend the dollar or anything. I'm not. Right? It's just the way it is. What do you think is going to happen to the housing market? So ultimately what we are going to have is you're going to have inequality continue to rise so long as you have new money coming into the system. The current belief of what, like, it's going to, it's hard to incorporate the what ifs that this continue like kind of thing going on. What I just look at is what has led us up to this point right now. I mean, whether you look back years, decades, century, whatever, what we have is a continual inequality growth, right? Where the inequality is getting worse and worse and worse. Now you can see it when you think about an average income from back in the day with an average job and you just had a little bit of discipline, you could save the money to buy a house. Your income would be enough to buy that house. Single income. Be enough for the whole family, kids, vacation, cars, all the stuff, right? One single income can do that with a fairly average job. Nowadays, it does not take place at all, right? Not, I mean, well, I'm not saying it doesn't take place at all. The direction of moving into that does not take place. The moving away from that does. That happens constantly. So the direction of being able to have a single income provide enough for an entire household, like the direction of that is getting worse and worse and worse. That's the inequality growth. Now, there's no better understanding of who it is that's separating themselves from the poor than property owners and capitalists. So ownership of property or being in a position of capital deployment for a return, whether that's investing in stocks, business, rental property, whatever, right? Being a capitalist and being the property owners, those are the two people who separate themselves. So without that, then it's going to be very difficult. See, there was a time where you didn't have to be in that position. You could have just been an average dude with an average job, making an average living, doing average things, and, and be able to have like just your average retirement. But that doesn't work. Like now you have to be excelling at many things. You have to have your average job. You have to have side incomes. You have to have, all kinds of things going on in order to compete enough with the people who have acquired so much in their life, who have purchased properties. You have to compete against that. That's very difficult to do, right? And the more time goes on, the more money that gets injected into the system, the more separation between the rich and the poor take place. This is what drives me nuts about the idea of lowering interest rates. The idea of lowering interest rates will create more debt issuance, which is money issuance, which is more separation between the rich and the poor. And this is what drives me nuts about the idea of it is that, like I'm cool with it either way. I give it no meaning as far as like, man, this is wrong or right. But what gets me about it is like I know what that will do for the people who have property. I know what it'll do for people who have, who have capital deployment into stocks and bonds or whatever. Like I get that. Like I'm somewhat in that position, not entirely, not greatly, but I'm in somewhat of that position, and I would be excited to see it actually happen. The problem with it is that it would create more inequality. And when I hear a president saying we need to lower interest rates, I'm like, dude, this might as well just be driving a wedge. You might as well just be. I mean, I'm cool with it. I'm hoping that I'm on the other side of it. So, but I mean, when you pound that wedge, I mean, damn, dude, you know how hard it makes it for everybody, except for if you're rich. I mean, if you're rich, it makes it awesome for you. If you're already in position, but if you're not in position, it makes it worse. It makes the problem harder, right? If you're in position, it makes the problem easier. Like your problem, you don't have a problem. Your opportunity is easier, right? So again, it's just like, man, it sucks to understand it in this fashion for people out there who really have a lot of faith. And I'm thinking, man, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't put your faith in anything out there, especially government. That's like the last place you would want to do that. But if you could take it internalize it for yourself to understand what it is that you need to do as an individual to position yourself, whether or not you might have businesses, you might have a lot of rental properties, you might be graduating high school having no clue of what it is that you're supposed to do, and your parents are saying, hey, we would really like you out of the house because we can't afford to have you here. Like there's people out there that I know who would live that exact existence and ended up on the streets right after high school. It was sad. It was very sad. Right? I mean, to think like every single person in life has a super different situation that, like, I mean, I was pretty proud of myself and Sarah. We graduated high school. We went to two different nights. She went to Astoria. I went to Napa. We graduated high school. We were living in our own apartment when we graduated high school. We never looked back. It was difficult. It was very hard For years we struggled. In fact, we never did quite move out of a position of struggling. There was times when we did better than others. We were working construction. She was tending bar. There was good money flow, but we never saved any of it. It was a very depressive time when you consider all the alcoholism and everything that kind of went with it. And at 40 years old, debt, burden, nothing. Like, it was horrible, right? To figure that stuff out, to be able to turn my life around and knock it out in 8 years, to be like essentially putting myself back in place where I should have been, not quite, I still got time to make, I got a lot of time to make up for, but being in a much better position than I ever was, in a position in which I should have been originally, to do it in 8 years in one of the most expensive places in the country. Again, Astoria is ranked 10th of the most expensive places to live with populations of 10 to 50,000. So here I am, I'm proving it. I'm proving it can be done right now in real time on my channel. Like, when I started my channel, I had nothing. I was broke, in debt, and all the other stuff. Right? And over the course of since November of 2017, when I started this channel, I've moved into this position. And a lot of people say, man, I can't, not all of us can have a YouTube channel. I worked this YouTube channel like it was a second job. You could have a second job, right? It pays about as much as a second job might have done at times. And sometimes it doesn't pay much at all. Yeah. Today is actually doing quite well with all these super chats. But you have to understand that each person's going to be individually positioned. Like, there's some people who are loving the idea of this stock market crash. Like, love it. They're smiling, they're dancing. Like, opportunity to buy in, been waiting, right? Other people are like crying their eyes out. Which one, like, people are saying, is this good or bad? And I'm like, I don't know. What meaning you're giving it, not me. Alrighty, guys. What time is it? Oh my gosh, it's an hour and 41 minutes into this. So I honestly think that people are going to be positioning themselves in the housing market. I think the housing market crash of the great financial crisis of back in 08, I think a lot of that had to do with a speculative market that involved a lot of creation of debt that would never get paid. That isn't taking place in the same fashion. There was a lot of overbuild that was taking place during that time. That is also not happening right now. The concept of what was happening then that created the problems, I don't see the same issues happening today. And although it's set up to be a pretty dramatic fall, I don't see where that dramatic fall is going to take place unless you have a dramatic rise in unemployment. So if unemployment starts to spike up in a really dramatic fashion, I'll come back and I'll start changing my tune on the housing story. But at this point, I don't see it happening. Is it set up to? Sure, what if, right? What if? But a lot of things were set up, or set up to. Recession, like how many people were screaming recession in 2020, 2023, 2024, 2025, recession, still no recession, right? Now, is it coming? Very well could. Don't know. Seems like it's lining up, especially with all the ideas of tariffs. Who knows what kind of downfall and impact this is going to be? Could be quite dramatic. Could force the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates and do all the other stuff. Or it could be negotiated. Credible threats, right? Who knows? Same game for centuries. First easy money, then tighten the Illuminati elite, buy assets. Yeah. It kind of really is, it's like, you think about it, if you issue the debt, that's like kind of sowing the seeds, right? You sow the seeds out there, you get the debts, people build up these wonderful, beautiful projects, and then you turn the debt issuance off, and then people can't borrow the money, and then there's no payments that can be made because people who were borrowing money were essentially spending that money, which would eventually make the payments into the projects. So if there's no more like debt issuance or new money issuance, and the debts don't get paid, those projects, those, bankruptcies, those, whatever defaults start to happen. And then people who have the money come in and buy them for pennies on the dollar. So all these big, beautiful projects that people had borrowed money to start and build end up selling for pennies on the dollar to the rich elitists. And then you have even more separation between the rich and the poor. That's why like it wasn't the point of having an economy around gold. It's just that was what was happening with gold, is that once you had the accumulation of wealth, you had a redistribution of wealth, which was essentially like the business cycles that a lot of people were finding very painful and didn't want anymore. And so they set up this Federal Reserve Bank to say, hey, if we, issue money, then we can actually like smooth out the business cycle by creating currency, having this elastic money supply. And this is how they kind of convince the people to allow a central bank, or to a reasoning for a central bank is to smooth out this business cycle. Anytime the economy heated up and the concentration of wealth would happen, they would inject this money into the system, right? The only problem is that they just kept injecting money into the system. And then we end up with debt cycles. Alrighty, guys, I'm going to have to call it quits. I got chores and all kinds of stuff to do. This was a lot of fun. We got 527 people watching with a bunch of super chats, $51.23 in super chats. You guys are awesome. 292 likes. Go hit that like button. With 527 people watching, we can have that like button up to well over 300. Get it up to a bunch of likes, and the YouTube algorithm loves picking up the video, spread it around for more people to join in. I'm being impersonated over Telegram. I need to know I'm communicating with the proper account. You are not communicating with the proper account. I'm very rarely on Telegram, guys. I have the account there. It's just that I can't be everywhere at once, and there's so many different platforms to be at that I just can't focus in on all of them at once. Even just trying to be consistently posting stuff there is just too difficult. I mean, really, I have a full-time job, I got a family, I got YouTube, I got side hustles, I got all kinds of stuff, and I can't focus in on all these different platforms out there. So I'm consistent on YouTube. That's the only thing that I'm consistent at, and I'm going to always be consistent on YouTube. This is my favorite place to be. All the rest of the platforms, they're okay. TikTok absolutely sucks. I hate it. Worst place in the world to post things. So anyway, I'll always be here on YouTube, though. I'll be here first, first and foremost. You're communicating with Habib from India. Yeah, absolutely. George Gammon's all language dub channels are getting taken down by YouTube. Keep an eye on your email. Yeah, I saw you had posted a video, like, what was it, yesterday or this morning or something about that. So let me see if I understand the logic. If you receive an inheritance from your grandfather's estate, that's legal and okay and a good thing. I don't know. You guys must be talking. Everyone can be rich in America. I think that's, I don't know. I think that's a little bit of a perspective thing, right? I mean, what is rich? What is wealthy? Food, conveniences, and pleasures of life. I mean, everybody has a different idea of what wealth is. Material possessions, experiences, money in the bank. I mean, who knows what wealth is for an individual. Food, conveniences, and pleasures of life is a very, like, it's a very simple thing for when you say it, but it's really complicated when you think about, like, what it is that means to you. To me, like, wealth is easy. It's nothing, like, to me, it's like super easy. I don't need much. View, food, music, those are the things that I want in my life. Everything else is kind of secondary, and I don't know what else, like, anything else would just be a simple short-time thrill, right? I mean, you enjoy it for a moment, but really, if it was so consistently in your life, you would get bored of it. So it's kind of nice to not have things going on in your life, to keep it as boring as possible, so that when you do have those experiences that are quite exciting and thrilling, and they're occasional, they mean that much more to you, right? If you had it all the time, it wouldn't mean anything to you. So, all right, guys. Good times. Had a lot of fun. I'm going to call it quits now. All right, I'm wealthy, 9 kids, 26 grandkids, 11 great grandkids. Oh my gosh. William. Wow, William. That's cool. All right, this dude definitely drinks tap water. Well, oh, beloved. Yeah, you're just a troll for the channel, and that's understandable, man, because I know a lot of people need attention, and you need people to, like, kind of argue with you in order for you to feel something, because probably you have a difficult time feeling things on your own. And I know I kind of used to do this, like go and trigger people and see what kind of response you would get from them. It's a bit of a sad existence. I get it. I know. But, you know, that's sometimes, you know, you got to do what you got to do in order to have something to feel. And, you know, I understand that you're using the channel for that. I hope you get some information from it, too. I hope you retain a little bit of the credible threat theory, maybe internalize some of it so that when you are making financial decisions, at least you're making some appropriate ones there. Okay, guys, Uneducated Economist, you let me know.